Hello and welcome to the Posers Podcast, the place where we skip the fluff, say the quiet parts out loud, and dig into what really matters. This is where photography, psychology, and business collide. I'm Jody, your host, and I'm bringing you my raw takes, hard wins, and a whole lot of unfiltered honesty about what it takes to build a photography business that actually connects and makes money. So ladies, grab your headphones and get your tits up and your ears open because we are going to build something really incredible together. Well, hello, and welcome back, my beautiful posers, to another episode of the Posers Podcast. I am coming to you directly from Turks and Caicos with this episode. I would love to say that I'm here just because I'm off gallivanting and enjoying some sort of glorious vacation that was planned, but that actually is not the case at all. We ended up being in Turks and Caicos suddenly, maybe, because my husband, who is such an incredible salesman for the company that he works for, he won this trip to Turks and Caicos, and we didn't find out that we were coming until December or January or so, and here we are in February, soaking in the sun while my skin is literally like screaming at me because it's pasty white and now it's some form of red that is going to be very painful for me tomorrow. But while I've been here, I've been working the whole entire time, and I taught the mastermind yesterday, and everything that we were going over during the mastermind was email marketing. And it just happened to be that on the flight over, I was also reading a book about email marketing. And so it's also a really, really, really awesome book. It's one of my favorite business books that I've ever read. It's called Just Fucking Send It, and it's written by a guy named Ian Stanley. And this is the first book that I've ever read of his, and I guess he's also a stand-up comedian. So his book is half parts incredibly entertaining and funny, and then other half part being that he is an incredibly successful email marketer. So the book in and of itself has been highly entertaining and highly fruitful in regards to learning about email marketing a little bit more. So if you are looking for a good book recommendation, that is a really killer book to be picking up. So I'm telling you all of this because it would very naturally happen that because that's what we were talking about in the mastermind and that's what I'm reading about right now, that I would hop on here and record a little episode for you about email marketing. But then I had this crazy thought, and I was like, you know what? We're in Turks and Caicos. The reason why we're here is because we're celebrating my husband. His company put on this whole entire event that was called the Masters of the Masters, because they just had a recent, sort of convention, conference sort of thing in Las Vegas that was called the Masters, where a lot of the company showed up and learned a bunch of sales tactics. But then now this is the Masters of the Masters. So it's like the best of their company, which my husband, I've now seen him go into 3 different companies and automatically become number 1 or number 2 globally for their company. And he is I'd call him a bad bitch, but he's such a bad bitch at sales. I might get in trouble for that comment here in just a little bit. But I thought for the very first time ever, maybe I would allow for mine and my husband's dynamic to show up on the podcast just a little bit. Now, let me say this before I let this man speak. Let me say that this is the first time that a man is going to be introduced on the podcast. And you guys know that I would not allow a man inside of this space if he wasn't already fully vetted and found to be a through and through feminist and a supporter of the women and a supporter of the arts. And he is a man who absolutely loves what I do and loves what I have built. And I've never, I mean, granted, I've only been married to 2 men, but of the 2, he has always been a huge supporter of my business and has been kind of like blown away by everything that we do as photographers and the businesses that we build. So with that being said, you guys know I would not let any sort of like toxic bro energy come into this poser space. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to not the sales guy, but like the sales guy, the one and only Mr. Brian Hendricks.
Wow. What an intro. What an honor, though.
Well, first of all, I think that we need to tell them that your last name is not actually Hendricks.
No.
Tell the people where Brian Hendricks stemmed from.
Well, we know that there was no way you were taking my last name. And there was a lot of talk about, well, you're going to take my last name, like meaning I would take yours.
There was.
And so it was just an ongoing joke.
To give a little bit of backstory too, I know I've talked about this on the podcast before, that when I went through my divorce, I made the decision to sort of go through that divorce outwardly instead of inwardly. So my audience on Instagram and inside of my email newsletters and everything like that, the audience that watched me build my business, they also watched me go through the divorce and then watched me go on what I lovingly refer to as my slut spree. Are you comfortable talking about my slut spree on the internet?
No comment, but I'm here for it. Baby.
So after I got divorced, so I was 19 whenever I met my ex-husband, and I married him whenever I was 22. So whenever I got divorced, I went a little bit like, I don't want to say wild, because I don't think it was wild compared to anybody else's wild. But during the year that I was divorced and single, I had myself a little bit of fun. And I would often talk about those dates on my social media, and I would come out of the dates and I would basically like run them through the ringer of like what they wore, what they said, how awful they were, or like one guy wore cargo shorts and he showed up late, and I was like, that's insanity to me. I would never, for one, put a guy in cargo shorts. For two, nor would I date him. So I went on this little like spree of dating all these guys, and it was very much so like a content pillar inside of my business of who I was dating that week. And then all of a sudden, Brian came along.
I'm just terrified what you talked about after our date.
I actually never did. So the very last story that I put up on social media was that I was on a flight, because Brian and I had met over Bumble, but he didn't live in my city. And so I was on a flight because you had flown me out to Phoenix because you wanted to like go on a date. And so I was on that flight and I put up a little story that said, I'm on my way to Phoenix to go see about a boy. And then I never talked about you after that. And all of the dating stories just like completely vanished. And I kept you a big, huge secret for like, what was it?
New Year's Eve.
No, it wasn't New Year's Eve. Remember, it was whenever we were in Chicago at the Didka's bar. Remember? True. That was the first time that I like made a big deal about the fact that I gave you like a full face on Instagram stories, and that I finally like let people know who I was dating, because I met you and it stopped all the dating stories, and then it was just literal radio silence. It was crickets. So then I finally like introduced you to the audience, and then I dated you very publicly on my social media for the longest time, and they watched us date, they watched us get engaged, they watched us have to plan a wedding in Italy, cancel a wedding in Italy because of COVID, and then the following year get married in Italy. So the reason why also you're referred to as Mr. Hendricks is because my audience has always kind of like followed the story of us dating and getting engaged and getting married and all of that. And I always referred to you as Mr. Hendricks because I wanted you to change your name at our wedding. I wanted it to be my wedding present, that you changed your middle name so that you were Brian Hendricks Gabel. And I told you that if you did that, I would change mine to Jody Hendricks Gabel. And you didn't do it. You didn't do
Hendricks
it.
is a pretty badass name, though.
Hendricks is a really badass name, and
yeah.
you really should think about changing it because
it's still out there.
It's kind of iconic.
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, not that we're going to get into this like full blown like history of me and you, because then me and you will just sit here and like googly eye and talk about like.
I mean, I could do that too.
You could do that too, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get like straight into business. So, like I said before, my husband is one of those guys that they say like, oh, he could sell ice to an Eskimo. Like, I hate that saying, but it's actually true. And you actually started in sales. How old were you whenever you started selling knives?
Yeah, I was
door to door.
It was a college gig, like a summer job. And it was for, not so much door to door, but you get referrals.
He hates that I say it was door to door.
Yeah, it's okay. But it was my first exposure to like structured sales process and training and weekly meetings and accountability and success doing it. And all of a sudden, being a little 19-year-old, I made, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 in the summer, which for a college kid was awesome.
That's a lot.
And that was my first taste of like, wait, I was good at that. And I made some good money. Like, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Okay, so here's the nerdiest thing about us is that because Brian's obviously been in sales almost his basically your whole entire adult life. Not that I want to say like from utero, from the womb, but because Brian's been in sales. And then whenever I switched my business over to IPS, which obviously stands for in-person sales, then I got sort of like, I don't know, bit by the sales bug. And for the last 2 or 3 years or so, I've been so incredibly obsessed with learning the sales process. And Brian is obviously like very natural because it's almost like it's something that he's been doing just his whole entire adult life. So it comes very naturally to him, but he's obviously always been selling in the same exact way. And now over the last 3 years or so, since I've been learning to sell in that same way that he already knows, it's almost like I come into this sales equation having a lot of like book smarts, and Brian comes into the sales equation having a lot of street smarts, and he just sort of naturally, fluidly does it. And I still have to like really think about, I don't know, the frameworks and like the exact thing that you should say to roll objections and things like that. I'm still like a little newborn baby in it. And you're like, I don't know, an aged geriatric.
Thank you.
Right?
Question mark.
But because of that dynamic, there's a lot of times that like even whenever we wake up early and go for like a walk in the morning, or even having conversations like before we're heading off to work or something like that, that we're talking about sales. And that sounds really incredibly nerdy.
It's more me asking you, honestly, because you bring insight and stuff I've never even thought about. And I've even shared it in our morning meetings at work, and people are blown away that was my idea. But of course, I tell them it was yours.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what normally happens. We go on like walks in the morning, and he'll usually like throw out some sort of like scenario happened at work, and he's like, there's this one that I remember that I actually love as a really good example, because we were actually done walking and we were upstairs in the bathroom. Remember, you were like getting ready for work and I was in the shower. Mm-hmm. And you said to me that once a person gets into the idea that their no is a no, that there, what was it? It was
testimonials.
Yeah. It was the guy who was saying that he had read some bad testimonials about your company. And literally there's like one bad testimonial. There's like 2 bad testimonials for your company because you work for a really great company. But he had read like one of them, and he had really gotten it in his head that he was like down and out, right? Mm-hmm. And you said to me that you felt like once he was there, he was locked in and he was like done for and out, right? Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Is that kind of how, am I saying it correctly?
Yeah. I feel like once he had his mind made up, it would just be me trying to defend and just trying to grasp for his business, and he was set.
Yeah, that's what it was. Is you said that then you went into a place of where you were selling like features, right? You were like, no, but if you stick with us, you're going to get this and you're going to get this and you're going to get this. And I remember like literally washing my hair in the shower and being like, I don't know, Brian, I feel like that's not the right play. And you were asking me like, okay, like, what do you think? Why was that not the right play? And we started to talk about the Croc Brain, which is taught inside of Oren Klaff's book called Pitch Anything. And this is where this dynamic comes into play so much, is because this was something that you had never heard before, right?
Mm-hmm. Never heard of it. Yeah. No, I mean, and to this day, I still try to use it ever since that conversation. But...
Okay. That's really good. That's really interesting. Okay. So in talking about that, like I explained to Brian that inside of Oren Klaff's book, it's called Pitch Anything. And this is like something that can be used automatically inside of our sales rooms for photography, is that clients come in and that they are in what is called the Croc Brain, which obviously is short for crocodile brain, right? That they're coming in, and a croc brain is like full of fear. So if you imagine literally like a crocodile being like a prehistoric animal and only being able to understand whether or not their life is in danger or their life is safe, that's like the croc brain. So as they're walking in to the sales meeting, they're in this place of like not really knowing what to expect, not really knowing how much this is going to cost, not really feeling comfortable with the whole scenario. So they're in that fight or flight sort of mindset. And so there's a lot like deeper explanation to all of this too, but there's the croc brain and the analytical brain, and then one other brain, like there's a midbrain, and then there's a logical brain, and then the emotional brain. Okay, so it's croc brain, analytical brain, emotional brain, right? And so the place that people buy from is the emotional brain, but they come in scared in the croc brain. And then whenever you get into some sort of a pitch, they go into the analytical brain, which is logistics, which is like spreadsheets, which is pricing, which is like thinking about their budget, thinking about their bank account. But your job as the salesperson is to always get them into the emotional brain, the emotional buying space, because that's the place that they're always going to make decisions. So in Brian's scenario, whenever the guy was saying, oh, I like read some testimonials, and he was going pretty hard at you. Remember, he was like, this is a scam. This is not going to work, because Brian sells dental implants. And so he was like an older guy. Do you remember where he was from?
No, East Coast somewhere.
East Coast somewhere, older guy, just sort of like really being in his croc brain, really feeling like his alarm centers had gone up. He was terrified. He was scared. So he automatically went into that fight or flight spot. Or even if he was in his analytical brain, then I was saying to Brian that his job is to get him to go into his emotional brain instead of trying to fight it with features. Mm-hmm. Then the play would be to go into the emotional space. So Brian does this like really incredible thing where he is so good about really taking some time at the beginning of his like sales meetings in order to just get a feel for the person, understand what they love, what they don't love. I feel like us as photographers, we already have a lot of this because we already know our clients pretty well. We've been on a photo shoot with them. We know what their kids are into. We know what their kids' names are. We know a lot of like personal details, but you have to do that like ahead of time, right? So you want to talk about what that process looks like. I don't want to say it's almost as if you're like collecting ammunition for later whenever they have objections, but it kind of is.
It is,
right?
Absolutely. It's all virtual, what I do. So I have a very short window of time virtually to not only get to know them, get to know their why, get to know their fears, what are they excited about, present, and then pitch the price, which is high ticket sales, and convince them to say yes within 30 to 45 minutes, again, virtually. So to your point, it's a lot of probing and asking, first of all, identifying what those objections are going to be in the very beginning. So if you think about it, there's always pretty much two objections, price or spouse. And
hold on, wait. Explain what that means by spouse.
Yes.
Like, what's the spouse objection?
For sure. So if I just have one individual, we'll use this example, a husband, and one of my questions is, oh, where are you from? And, oh, what's your wife's name? And as soon as he says his wife's name, okay, boom, I know, okay, she's not there with them. There's most likely going to be a spouse objection. So what I do is I start probing. And what I mean by that is throughout the conversation, it's just like, oh, let's call her Jody in this case.
Oh, I love that
Yeah,
for me.
beautiful
Okay.
name, beautiful name.
Beautiful
Yeah.
name. As you stare lovingly into
Yes.
my eyes.
But I would say is, man, it sounds like you've been doing a lot of research and it seems like you're really excited about this. What does Jody think about this? Does she understand that you're excited too? And does she understand the impact it's having right now on your life? Because I want to get as much, information about Jody as I can. Is she supportive? Does she even know that he's doing this? Is she on board with him making a big decision like this without her? So it's a lot of me probing and trial closing, if you want to call it that.
Oh, I love that. Trial closing.
Right. Without being too obvious about it.
Yeah. Like you're just sort of fishing for information, but at the same time, you're really taking some notes down of like what their dynamic is, which I feel like I do something similar. Like in my sales script, whenever they come into the studio and they're sitting down and they're having the conversation, for one, I have the luxury of being able to send emails out beforehand and even have the conversation beforehand saying like, hey, when you come in for your sales meeting, I need all decision makers to be in the room, but you don't have that luxury. No. So I'm able to say like, hey, all decision makers need to be able to like be in the room. But then whenever somebody's coming in and say I normally would have like just a wife coming in or just the mom coming in, then sitting down, having a quick conversation of like, oh, okay, cool. Like, obviously, if it's a family photo shoot, then the husband knows that the family shoot has like taken place. But it could very well be that she did a motherhood session and that he doesn't even know, or it's a boudoir session and he doesn't even know. And so then having those conversations just as these little qualifiers of like, oh, okay, so does Brian know that you're here today? Like, does Brian know that you did these photos? Did you tell him how great they are? Like getting those sort of like morsels of information because you're sort of collecting that information and know if they give you that spousal objection later, which what Brian means by that spousal objection is that once you get through the whole IPS meeting and you get to that pitch, then they would say, oh, I can't spend this amount of money without checking with my spouse first. And that's a really big objection that we get in our sales rooms too. I always talk about this. I always say that like sales is sales. No matter what company you're in, the framework is still the same. And that, so this like translates straight over into what we do too, of like having that conversation and seeing whether or not that objection is going to come up later so that you already have the information ahead of time in order to roll it. So what that would look like is me having that conversation saying like, oh, hey, so you did this boudoir shoot. Does Brian know that you're here? Okay, cool. So what's the dynamic look like in your marriage? Is there a threshold you're allowed to spend? Have you guys had conversations about this ahead of time? Or even saying like, hey, do you have to clear purchases through him at all? That way, that answer that they give me at the beginning of the meeting can then be used later. If they try to say like, oh, hey, I need to run this through my husband, I can say like, oh, yeah, but remember whenever we were talking about it before, he's so supportive of you. He loves that you're like, I don't know, treating yourself to this sort of a photo shoot. He loves how much it made you feel incredible. Like you've got that in your back pocket so that you can have that like information in order to roll it later. Right? Sorry, I feel like I sort of steamrolled your conversation in order to like bring it, to bring it back to photography a little bit.
Spouse subjection is across the board. You're going to deal with it no matter what industry. And so the more that I, in my situation, can identify, okay, this is going to be a spouse objection, the more I can kind of playfully ask like, oh, man, good for you. You're going to make this decision without her? Like just to probe and feel like his reaction. Oh, no, I can't do that. And I'm like, and then I'll play along like, oh, I don't blame you. I don't want to be sleeping in the doghouse. I don't want you there either, buddy. But you just got to feel it out and then just know, okay, this is going to be my big hurdle. My whole time I'm just talking, building rapport. How am I going to overcome this in 30 to 45 minutes?
I think that's actually genius that you do, because I think that the normal way of looking at sales is that like you go into the meeting, you have your sales script that you're going to roll through. And then for us, we do the reveal, we show them their photos, we get through the whole entire thing. They build this collection, they love it. Then we show them the price. And then it's like, boom, then there's the objection. And we get either like, oh, I have to think about it, or, oh, I've got to talk to my husband, or they'll just say straight out. I mean, we already talked about the fact earlier down at the pool that even those two objections are usually based in price too. But then you get that objection at the end. But what you're saying is that like you probe for that objection prior to it ever happening, so that as you're running the whole entire rest of your sales script, you're already formulating a lot of that, like, not, I don't want to say convincing, because sales isn't convincing anybody to do anything. They're already sitting in that room with you. They already have the desire. They already want the thing that you have. Your job is to just sort of give them permission to do it for themselves. And so like, I just think that that's a genius way of looking at it, that you're almost like getting that objection from the front end, so that by the time you get to the end, you've already kind of rolled it the whole entire time that you've been having this conversation, which is like genius level, which is why you're so freaking good at what you do. Okay, but we got on a little sidebar because we were talking about the guy who was, he was really like coming back at you saying like, this is a scam. He read a bad testimonial. He did all this stuff. And my stance on it was that your job as the salesman, no matter how hard of a no they're putting up to you, you have to make the transition to get them out of that croc brain or out of that analytical brain and get them back into the emotional brain. And the thing that we use for that would be like a pattern interrupt, right? Which is something, again, because I've like studied sales and I read books on sales and I like know all of like this vocabulary of like how we do things. And whenever I come to you and I'm like, oh, the answer to this like part of the equation is a pattern interrupt, and you're like, what's that?
Come on, I know what a pattern
is. Do you?
Of course.
Okay, tell us what a pattern interrupt is.
Yes, it's a comment that just debunks any type of resistance, and it gets them out of their croc brain, to your point, and back into the emotional, like kind of, it's almost kind of humor in what I would throw in, just like a little line of humor that also gets them thinking a different way about it versus staying in that rational, logical side of their brain and being scared. Okay,
that's interesting that you think of it as like a humor sort of thing, because I think of it more as like a way to bring them back into like the emotional side of things. And so the way that I talked about it whenever I was in the shower with you that day was that I said, okay, so I know you've talked to him beforehand. This is how we got off topic earlier, is because we were talking about how you make sure that you have this pre-conversation and you almost like pre-script them and you get a lot of information from them. And so you had already known that this guy absolutely loved the Chicago Cubs. He absolutely loved Wrigley Field, right? And so I brought it up saying like the move to make there would be to bring in something that means so much to him. And especially we've talked about this before with like your line of work too, because like the clients that Brian's seeing, it's like normally older people who their teeth have decayed or their teeth have fallen out or they've had like really bad dental care before and they're coming in for like dental implants. And so the things that they're saying to him about like their why and the reason why they want to have this is because they don't have any quality of life anymore. They don't have their smile. They don't feel comfortable talking to their friends anymore because they don't have any teeth. So bringing things back into that place of like how this really affects them in their life is like a really big thing that Brian's always using, because his industry is so emotional like that he's literally giving people their smile back. And so bringing that guy, the scammer guy, the testimonial guy, back into the idea of, hey, you love Wrigley Field, right? And it's this pattern interrupt that it's like, whoa, hey, wait a minute. I'm expecting you to tell me why this testimonial is a lie. And instead you're talking about Wrigley Field. So it automatically like shakes his brain, automatically makes him think like, whoa, that was a pivot I wasn't expecting. So whenever you're saying like, hey, you love Wrigley Field, right? And he's like, yeah, sure. Of course I do. I already told you that. And then you say like, okay, well, do you think that there's ever been anybody who's gone to Wrigley Field and who's had a bad time? And then one of the number one things you have to do with sales is you have to ask questions and make them say the answer. Brian could have said, like, oh, hey, you've been to Wrigley Field so many times, and I bet you anything, there's been people who didn't like going, and so they would technically give Wrigley Field this bad testimonial, but Brian teaching it to him is way less powerful than Brian asking a question and getting him to give the answer. Do you know why that is? I feel like I've never like come across that in studying of why it's more powerful for them to say it.
Because they're taking ownership of their words.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's the logical way of thinking about it. But I didn't know if there was, you know me, I want some sort of like psychological theory. I want some sort of like defined phenomenon of like, okay, this is the reason why this happens and why this is more potent. But either way, it's far more potent to ask a question and get them to answer it, because then they're the ones taking ownership, telling them themselves the story instead of you sort of like forcing it down their throat. So him saying like, hey, do you think that anybody's ever gone to Wrigley Field and had a bad time? Then this guy automatically has to say like, well, yeah, sure, of course there has been. And so then Brian would say like, okay, well, in all fairness, did them having a bad time based on the thousands of people that you know who love it, the thousands of people who go every single season, the thousands of people who are like diehard Cubs fans, do you think that those few people who had a bad time at Wrigley Field had anything to do with your opinion of Wrigley Field or your experiences at Wrigley Field? And so then him having to answer like, well, no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense at all. So then automatically he's softened and he's thinking about this testimonial in a completely different way. And Brian essentially has debunked his own thought process because he got him out of that croc brain and he brought that back into like the emotional brain, right? So the two main objections that you say that you normally get, one being like they've got to talk to their spouse or they've got to think about it or like something like that.
Price.
And what's the second one?
Price.
It's always price.
It always is price.
Yeah.
Even if it's spouse, it's to talk about price.
Yeah.
And without value, without really uncovering their true why and getting, for me, 4 to 6 whys of why they want to do this, price doesn't matter. If there's no value, if there's no deep connection of like, this is how it's going to impact my life, you're never going to win because the price is going to win over that. So you have to establish the value. For what I do is really try to keep it as emotional as possible. You guys have an industry where it's very emotional. Implants can be very emotional, but then quickly switch to logical when it comes to price. So I have to try my best to keep it emotional as long as I can. And so what I do is I ask a lot of questions of like, I call them consequence-based questions. I don't call them that, but that's what they're called. But it's more questions that are like, okay, man, okay, let's picture this a year from now. Let's say you don't do the dental implants. Your mouth kind of stays the same. Maybe it gets in worse condition. You're having health problems. Is that something you want to settle for? I mean, what is that like for you? Talk to me about that. And you get them to open up about like, no, I don't want that. And they're slowly walking down that path of, I don't want to deal with the consequences. Yes, I want this solution. So I ask consequence-based questions of, if you don't take action, what does that look like? Are you willing to settle for that? And the way I wrap it up before I go into my pitch, my presentation, is say, Mr. Hendricks, Mr. Hendricks, based on our great conversation.
You're talking to my dad now.
Yeah. I would lower my voice, Mr. Hendricks.
Mr. Hendricks.
No, but I'm recapping, like, based on everything you told me, you feel like not only it would give you your smile back, but like you'd be able to sing in church again. You'd be in those pictures with your grandkids, be able to be close to your wife. Like, these are things that you live one time. You want to do the things you love. Am I hearing you right? Did I nail that or what? And I kind of playfully say that. They're like, yeah, you nailed it. But the reason I do that is because I know that when it comes to the price and they're going to say that's really expensive, I can then go back to that conversation and be like, whoa, let's slow down a second, Mr. Hendricks. Earlier we were talking and you agreed how much this is going to change your life. And you agreed that you don't want to settle for the alternative, right? So besides the price, is there anything else that's holding you back? And you're isolating, right? Just typical rolling the objections. And again, it always comes to price. But the more that you can have those conversations proactively, probing, like we keep mentioning, it just helps you identify quicker what it's going to be and figure out a game plan to overcome it.
Here's a random question, and we didn't like chat about this before, and I'm really curious to just hear what your like off the cuff answer is like, There's so much in our industry. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're women and that like we don't have this sort of like drilled into us as little girls, you know, the sales process and like business and, you know, being in these sort of like conversations that things feel what we say is quote unquote like salesy, right? Has there ever been, like in your man brain, has there ever been a time that you've felt like I'm being salesy, or that by you even being aggressive inside of a sales call, even being like, you know, pushing them to like really like get over these objections and get to the thing that they want? Has there ever been a time that you've thought like, oh man, I'm being really salesy. This is like gross of me.
There's definitely been times when I've felt like I've been too aggressive. I wouldn't call it salesy because anytime I'm dealing with anybody, it's very just me being myself. The whole reason I love sales and the reason I think I do well with sales is because I have an ability to connect with people, but I genuinely want to help them. In this case, it's a life changer for someone to get their smile back. Yeah. And I realize that. So I play off of, I'm here to help you. I think of me as your guide. I'm going to guide you through this process, and it's not salesy at all.
That's exactly
but it's also like that hidden ninja, like, yeah, I am closing you and I have a framework I'm following and I'm finding out what these objections are. Like you're following the strategy and everything you learned along the way. But I'm in the business of helping people and I'm changing their lives. So if I think about it that way, of having great conversations on my terms and get to the result I want, like it's never going to be salesy. I have to be aggressive and maybe take a few no's, not like a car dealership or like slam the desk. What is it going to take to earn your business? It's not like that. That's what I would feel is like slimy and gross, you know? Yeah. But it's never like that. I even tell people at the very end, if they're still giving me a no, I almost tell them like, man, I really feel like I let you down because you came to me looking for a solution and I'm trying my best to help you figure this out, but we're not on the same page. So I feel bad about that. And even if I don't get the sale, like they know that I'm being genuine and I'm still being kind of pushy in a way, trying to get that business. But that's my approach, just being myself, more conversational and just not like too aggressive and slimy like that.
I feel like that's the answer I always say too, is that like, I don't feel like anything that I do inside the sales room is salesy or aggressive or like pushy or too hard or anything like that, because I also know that I have people who are sitting in the sales room right there with me crying over how much they love their photos, right? Loving every single thing that I've done for them. I know that they're sitting in that room because there's something that they want, something that they desire. So me like letting them do the mental work to get over those hurdles in order to get the thing that they came to me for, I don't see how that can ever be salesy. I'm literally just being like a catalyst in them getting the exact product that they said that they wanted from me. For me, I feel like I'm just doing my job and I'm doing my job really well and making sure that they get everything that they've like ever dreamed of having from me. One quick point, because this is already like getting pretty long. I feel like me and you could sit here and do this for a really long time. I mean, we do this for a really long time, most of the time, but never recorded. But so one thing that you said just a little bit ago that I wanted to clarify just a little bit, because I feel like it's kind of the opposite for what I do and for what the listeners do, is that you said that you ask consequence-based questions. And because we're in an industry that like there isn't really some big, huge consequence that's going to happen like next week or like even next month or even at the end of the year, right? Like the consequence that we would have to talk about is like, okay, if you don't get these photos right now, what's that going to feel like when your baby's 18? What's that going to feel like when they're going off to college? Which that's such a like long-term consequence that happens, you know, that it's not as powerful as yours is, because yours doing dental implants, like you're very much so affecting people's happiness and you're affecting their life and you're affecting their livelihood. You're affecting so many different areas of their business. And so ours is like so much more of a luxury item. It's kind of the same as like if somebody was going out and being like, I want this Dior bag, which is stunning. There's not this huge consequence on it if they don't buy it because it's a luxury item. So I work a little bit more like desire based, whereas you work a little bit more consequence based. So whenever they're coming in and you're starting your sales script and you're doing all of that like pre-probing stuff, that you normally do. I do somewhat of a similar structure, but like they're coming in and I'm figuring out what their desires are. And I'm asking questions about what their grandma's house felt like growing up. I'm asking questions about like what kind of childhood they're wanting to give their kids, whether or not they want their house to feel as like warm and cozy and welcoming as their grandma's, and whether or not there was pictures lined in the hallways and lined up the staircase and like all of those sort of things. And I'm talking a lot more about also, I'm obviously like so psychology based, and I'm talking about how much these photos being on the walls really changes a child's sense of belonging, like inside of their family and things like that. So I'm sort of laying that groundwork about that desire base, so that by the time we get back around to whenever we're going to hit a hard objection, whenever we're going to talk about like, oh, this feels too expensive, the way that I'm usually rolling that objection is I'm going to talk about the cost versus the price. Do you ever talk about like cost versus price inside of like what you do?
Absolutely. Because there's a small window of time that people could be technically eligible to get implants if they wait too long and they lose bone density, for example, not to get too technical, but the older people get, they naturally lose bone density. If they've been in dentures, say for 20, 30 years, they're rapidly losing bone density. So if the cost in that scenario would be like, look, here's the scenario. If you don't do this, it's going to not only cost you, like think about your health. You're not going to be able to do this. And are you going to want to settle for dentures the rest of your life? You told me they don't fit, they slide around. So I'm walking them through the cost of like, man, if you don't do this, here's what this cost looks like for you.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. So there's always the cost and then there's always the price.
Right.
So the price is the number that's like, here's how much this is going to be today. This is how much has to come out of your bank account. That's the price. But the cost is always wrapped so much more into the human feelings that we have around it. So the cost is going to be wrapped around guilt. The cost is going to be wrapped around shame. The cost is going to be wrapped around regret, which those things, like we were talking about before, you have those like consequence-based questions that are so much more powerful than we have. But we have that idea of guilt and regret and shame of like, okay, are we doing everything that we're supposed to be doing in order to make sure our kids feel this like sense of belonging? Are we doing everything that we can to give them that like warm hug inside of our homes the way that our grandmother's houses felt? So whenever I get down to having some sort of an objection about the price, then I can always say like, okay, like I totally understand that budget is always king. I want to respect your bank account. I never want you guys to overspend anything more than you want to. But whenever you came in at the beginning of this meeting, you told me that the number one thing that you want to make sure to give your kids is that sense of belonging, and that you want your home to feel the same exact way that your childhood home felt. Do you feel like you're going to be able to do that if you're not actively making these decisions to have the albums on your coffee tables and have the frames up on your walls? And like, will your kids walk in and feel that warm hug if we're not doing those things today? So which one feels heavier, the cost or the price?
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a few times. And like you said in the beginning of this, you have the book smart. And these are all like just concepts that I may have heard about before, but I hear you say it and it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I can easily like work that into my spiel and my framework. And it makes a big difference because I have a lot of things you've taught me.
You have?
Yeah.
A lot of things I've taught you, you've like worked
into. Walks.
Yeah.
But that's one of them, is the cost of like, which one is heavier for you? Like, do you want to deal with that? Like,
yeah,
that's a big one.
That is a big one. Okay, we've gone pretty long here. We were planning on just like chatting a little bit, and now here we are almost 45 minutes into this. And you want to know what we have to go do, Mr. Hendricks?
A sunset cruise?
We have to go do a sunset cruise, which I'm very excited about.
I'm very excited you had me on, and I don't know if you'll ever invite me back.
I won't.
It was okay. It It was a pleasure.
This is the most male energy, the Posers podcast, I feel like that it can ever have.
Yeah, I'm
really.
tapping out. I'm done.
You're Oh, really? Because I just said you're not getting invited back. Now you're going to bring it back into your court. You're like, no, I tap out. No, I'm done.
I'll never be on your podcast.
I don't want anything to do with your podcast.
I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. That's really sweet. I love you very much. Thank you for coming on for your maiden voyage. I mean, we're going on a sunset cruise right now. So maiden voyage onto the Posers podcast. And I'm just completely joking with you. I will have you on at some point whenever I find something else to pick that genius brain about.
Oh, thanks, baby.
Okay, let's not make this weird. How do I end this? I'm like, okay, love you, bye. Nobody knows whether or not I'm talking to you or if I'm talking to them. No, I'm really stoked that there's these little places where my husband's world and my world can kind of collide, and we have this common, I don't know, conversation that we get to have every once in a while. We get to bounce things back and forth with each other. So thank you, Mr. Hendricks, for coming on the podcast for the very first and maybe the very last time.
It was a pleasure.
All right, that's all we've got. Bye for now, friends. Okay, so that is a wrap on this episode of the Posers Podcast. If you loved it, please subscribe, rate, and review, because honestly, algorithms are needier than all of our ex-boyfriends combined, and ladies, I need all the help I can get. If you've got thoughts, questions, love letters, even hate mail, please send them my way. I actually read every single one of them. So until next time, stay bold, stay messy, and don't let the bullshit win. Tits up, ears open, and go build something incredible. Bye for now, friends.